Hello and welcome back, everyone. Today we are going to be doing a rundown of Dev Diary 113 featuring the free content in upcoming update 1.1.3 for Victoria 3, which drops, unless I am mistaken, on April 28th, for those of you who are interested. And this is a lot of boats. Very excited to get into it. There is a lot of stuff here, and so here you can see what is going to be upcoming in terms of the schedule, and yes, we do have the release on April 28th. So without further much ado, let's get into it. Greetings, Victorian. A rapturous Thursday to you. The Victoria team... It is a rapturous Thursday. The Victoria team has been giving non-happy they've been giving happy salutations that are more exuberant in the nature of the language used other than happy, but they've not been capitalizing them, which leaves me feeling confused as to whether or not this is a more happy than a capital happy Thursday because it's of course a holiday, or less happy because it's not capitalized. I don't know how to feel. Rapturous, probably, because it is indeed Thursday. Let's continue. Today it is I, Admiral Lino, speaking to you, and I'm going to try and walk you through everything that is that is changing as part of the free update in 1.1.3, which releases along our expansion, the Great Wave, on April 28th. That's the way you do it. You plug it at the start, and then you do the disclaimer where you say, hey, pictures are WAD, everything's subject to change, etc. The mission: most of the reworks, additions, and changes discussed today with all aspects of the Navy. That's because when we started work on the expansion, our goal was to deepen the gameplay for navies across the board. There's some sort of deep ocean pun in here, but I'm not finding it. There's a pun to be made. Navies were a tremendously important part of the 19th century, with many major developments taking place. Previously, our game did not represent these well enough. This topic also allows us to lay a lot of groundwork for future work we might want to do with upcoming expansions down the road. In general, I think the Victoria 3 dev team cooks really long term, just generally speaking, in terms of very often we get a feature, and the feature, when it initially comes out, is like, oh, okay, this is cool. And then they build on it and they scaffold on it. Over time, this allows, the systems to really develop, and it doesn't feel like you're putting a bunch of, different clothing on the same mannequin. It feels like the game is, really, developing and pushing forward over time, even if it's not necessarily as flashy. And so, always excited to hear about this type of thing, because this is how I think the dev team generally works, is a lot of stuff is, okay, we lay the groundwork and it's not exactly sexy, but they create scaffolding that they can add on to later. So we wanted to focus on making ships and navies behave a bit more like you'd expect them in reality. They float, while also improving upon the controls of navies in order to allow easier use of the tactical maneuvers you have available. Tactics, don't like that. Naturally, we still need some amount of abstraction in parts of the systems, but I'll give explanations as to why in the appropriate sections. Yeah, so Victoria 3, just generally from a design philosophy, doesn't want to get bogged down in the tactics of the military, right? And also the economy, to a large extent, it's much more macro-focused, or that is kind of what's going on, and so you do not want to introduce a system that requires a ton of micro, or it's inconsistent with the design. Furthermore, we wanted navies to be more involved in other kinds of fields that they did not previously have representation. For example, securing interests across the globe. This is... I've read a little bit. I wish I had prepped... Well, I couldn't have prepped because we're reacting to it now. But there is... I've read a little bit about industrialization and also Great Britain over the course of, the late 1700s to the early 1900s, and projection of power. And a big part of why they were able to be hegemon and project their power was the power of their navy. And so part of why they were able to exploit and acquire additional advantages was the power of their navy. And this doesn't really get felt in game quite so much. So it really should give you an ability to gain access to markets that other people can't and this type of thing. But ensuring that you send men across the globe and are actually arriving there. And last but not least, we also aim to improve the audiovisual of your navies by adding more appropriate types, models, and soundscapes to make your dreadnoughts on ironclads feel impactful on the 3D map. On the 3D map. Generally, I don't zoom in enough to kind of feel this, but Vic3's got some nice vibes when you zoom in. The earthquake disaster being one of the screen shake and you suddenly feel like you're playing an FPS. This update is certainly one of our most ambitious and biggest updates yet. This is just a reminder, the major update. So they do major, minor, minor. Last two patches have been minor, minor. Now we're back to major. I can't wait to have you play it in April and see what you think. As always, consider all values. Yes, there we go. We get our disclaimer, boys. Everything's WAD, or not WAD, everything's WHIP. Wrong acronym. Not you don't want to say everything's WAD going in. Alright, and without further ado, it's a lot to go through, so we'll dive right into it now. Okay, ships becoming entities. In the beginning, there was the ocean. Everyone remembers, of course, Genesis when there was the ocean. Then Great Britain came, looked at it and said, I want it, and hence began the age of ship construction. Yeah, boats. With 1.1, ships will no longer, shout out to Zhang He, with 1.1, ships will no longer be able to behave like a bunch of men swimming, but rather actual units that countries construct. They will have health status, a long list of attributes, can be damaged, repaired, or sunk. But to explain more, we need to take a look where these ships are built. Shipyards, of course. So we will have a second construction queue by the look of it. Some of you remember how in the past we split shipyards from one entity into two, civilian shipyards and military shipyards. I don't like how... I actually disliked this split because it increased bifurcation. I just wanted more PMs. Because... the more different types of buildings you add, it slows down the game. And I felt that they could have just added more PMs for differentiation. But now we have a secondary queue. Well, it seems we've come back full circle and having them as one. Yeah! Woohoo! Yay! How the civilian plays part to it, I'll get into a talk when I talk about supply. For now, we'll focus on the military side of things. Very similar to construction sectors, shipyards now provide a capacity of ship construction points per week, which we can call boat points, or ship points, whichever has the better acronym. A ship in construction, e.g. the future Dreadnought, HMS Claudius, not naming it after Hannibal, boo, has a maximum number of points, well, I mean, can you name it after yourself? But, like, Hannibal Barca, obviously. Could have named it Hamilcar. Has a maximum number of points per week she can be assigned. If you have more ship construction points available than the highest entry in your ship construction queue can receive, the second entry will overflow to build it in parallel. Okay, we're learning how the construction queue works again. This parallelization could be quite crucial if you want to secure a navy and dominate the seas, since we're also making big ships, construction take a long time, which it did, as they did historically. See, like I said, a dreadnought will take multiple years to construct in Victoria 3, while smaller vessels, like torpedo boats, can be produced at a much higher rate. Depending on the ship type, different resources and amounts of material will be consumed during the construction process. That is interesting. So, the construction queue, as it stands right now for building buildings, it's just always consuming the exact same thing. But dynamic consumption based on what you're building is something new. I mean, it makes sense. I'm just not familiar with this. But of course, if you're building wood ships and metal ships, they're going to need different things. These are consumed by input goods by the shipyards, averaged out over them in your country. The old ship market, man-o'-wars, ironclads are a thing of the past. Due to pre-production, we even toyed around with the idea of making individual shipyards have their own queue, but found it didn't add enough compared to the effort it would have taken us. Yeah. This is an example of the micro versus macro, like, kind of design philosophy. From a simulation perspective, individual shipyards built a ship. They didn't build a fifth of a ship while a fifth of it was assembled somewhere else. Just having one massive construction queue. Just like a construction, your construction that you have built in the British Isles wouldn't help you in Kenya if you wanted to just build a bunch of stuff in Kenya, but you could still do it in Victoria 3, obviously. You could access ship construction via the construction panel, which has a new tab for ship construction in it. As you may see in the image below, when you construct a ship, you can choose default fleet where ships are sent to after this construction completes. We call that the place where you drop the ships, aka the drop shipper. And of course, get a list of all ships that are currently under construction. So we see capital ships, we have 83 being constructed, cruisers, we have 104. And what's all this? What's all this? Redacted for the moment. I did skim through this, looked at the images a little bit. Was really hoping that they wouldn't have, the thing at the beginning where they say everything's work in progress, that they would forget their disclaimer, because then I could say, this is how it will look in game. It's actually not a boats patch, it's an espionage patch. But alas, they put in their disclaimer. Terrible. Alright. We see redacted for the moment as well here. Curious what that might be, but don't have any immediate thoughts on it, so we will continue on. And it looks like a normal construction queue with the symbols. I have to imagine that they use a different symbol other than regular construction for representing boat construction, boat points, or ship points, whichever you prefer, or navy points even. But for now, we have the regular construction icon. So after multiple years, the HMS Claudius has been built, but even this majestic ship will once sail itself. This is true. Ships are not sentient. She needs a crew. With 1.1.3, shout out to Napoleon, ships receive their crews from a new building called the Naval Administration. These cover the main functionality that naval bases used to have, the recruiting of servicemen. On that note, pour one out for the naval bases, womp womp, as they no longer exist, womp womp. With the Naval Administration came some key changes, though. The most impactful one is that there's no longer one-to-one connection between a ship and the building. So you don't build a naval building to do the thing. Instead, you're going to have naval administrations will hire a total of 1,000 sailors per level, but they can be distributed in chunks of 100 people. A small frigate may only need 100 people and will take one slot level, leaving 900 men to be spread out on other ships. Interesting. So we're going to be able to choose from where we want to pull our Navy servicemen. I assume you just want to, all other things equal, you would want to just pull them from locations. You would want to pull them from locations that don't really have very good, like, mappy bonuses or very good resources or this type of thing. Okay, large ships such as the HMS Claudius may even need 1,500 men, meaning they occupy more than one full level. Okay. What also comes with that is that now you can and should construct naval administration buildings independently from ships. The construction of a new ship no longer creates one new level of the building, since there may be capacity in other not fully used naval administration buildings. In theory, you're probably going to want to overbuild one of these, whether it's the sailors or the boats, but okay. So all in all, that sounds tautological. Naval administrations act more like a pool of sailors, which you can Navy draws from. Despite that, with the slot logic, we will still be able to track which buildings should be affected by losses suffered in combat. Okay? So if the HMS Claudius, whose naval administration is built in the home counties, should suffer crew losses, we would be able to see that the soldiers there being killed have to be replenished. So you're going to care about promotion speed, I guess, to some extent. I also think qualifications matter for officers, in that you can't just pull officers from discriminated pups. So, I mean, yeah, you're okay. It's probably not too terribly nuanced where you put the things. You just put them where you have available pops. I guess those pops still live there. They add consumption there. It doesn't look like the Naval Administration has a PM other than just wages. But you're going to be adding, I guess, more consumption as well, to the extent that officers have a bigger buy basket. They're adding clone ships to Victoria 3. This means that their next project is related to the Star Wars license. Don't respond to that, chat. It's a trap. If Naval Administration building has hired a workforce and a ship is assigned to it, it will take on these brave men as their crew. Once the ship is fully crewed, it's ready to leave the port. Let's take a look at the beauty of the HMS Claudius in the new paddle for individual ships now that she's ready. We're gonna have... Ooh, girl, strut your stuff. We're gonna have a panel for looking at individual boats. I wonder if you could spin the boat. We see reset camera. Bro, the boat boys are gonna be so happy. Boat boys and girls. Oh man. We also do see some stats on it. Supply efficiency, carrying efficiency, visibility detection, vulnerabilities screening. And this of course implies some versions of combat where we can hopefully control C nodes in this type of thing. We also have crit chance, crit damage. I'm generally not... I don't think I'm a fan of crit in Victoria 3. I'm not a fan of crit in general. But okay. Let's continue on. Redacted for a while, redacted for a while. This is redacted. What's he trying to tell us? Redacted for the moment. Is he trying to tell us at what points in time we're going to get the thing? Who knows? Not me. Is the volume a little bit too loud on the music? Let's turn it down. In this new panel, you can see all the details of one particular ship, including a preview 3D model. You can also rotate and zoom to see the ship in all of her glory. We've already christened her under her new name. Usually we would have a generated historical name like the HMS Victory or many others. The prefix is also dynamic, so if you move to Great Britain out of a monarchy, the HMS will be dropped. Shout out to Her Majesty's service, as one does. In great consternation if you're living in the Victorian era. Her Majesty! Okay. Khan! It all circles back to Star Wars. That's a reference to make some of you upset and some of you to not understand. You'll understand important information on the ship right before the preview. In the 3 bars, we see very important hit points, crew supply status of the ship. I didn't even look at hit points. I guess that's this. Supply and... okay. Crew and supply status of the ship. So I'm guessing this will influence our operating range. And so you might, if you want further operators, you might have to concede certain things in ship design, like not having as many hull points, stuff like this. If a ship is reduced to 0 hit points or crew in battle, the ship sinks. You better not let that happen to our HMS Claudius. Couldn't you... well, okay, whatever. I was thinking maybe you could capture it if there's 0 crew, but, like, its sinking is fine, too. Following these crucial bars, we have a lot of stats, with 5 of them being highlighted above the others. Here they are: upkeep cost, speed, damage, blockade strength, and the armor themselves. Upkeep costs are dependent on the ship type and what they need, what goods they need to symbolize their regular maintenance costs that would occur over time in reality. So, we get consumption. Furthermore, I wonder where that consumption happens, though. Probably just in the market, not in a location or a state. Furthermore, there's also a small cost of ship construction points to symbolize this, so costs could also apply when the ship hasn't been damaged yet. Maintenance, this type of thing. Different from all that, there's also repair costs being applied to the ship that was damaged in combat if it goes back to port to get repaired to full strength again. Repair costs are dependent on the total amount of goods being demanded for the construction of the ship. So if a ship consumes 100 steel and 50 artillery for its construction, repairing 20% of its hit points would, okay, proportionally consume more. Consume the same amount. But does this use as much construction? What's to just keep you from just constantly building more boats instead of repairing them? I guess you're less likely to sink sailors. So what do all the other stats do? I will cover in later sections as when they become relevant, though most are fairly straightforward. Right now, of course, ships will usually not travel across the globe travel alone across the globe, but in a fleet. So let's take a look at the reworked fleet panel for a moment. This is redacted just for a moment. We have some capital ships and we have some cruisers. Unfortunately, not in multiples of 5 or 10, because we want to tear our hair out. As you can see, the panel has undergone quite a bit of change. You'll notice the highlighted stats now either summed up or averaged for the fleet, with the total speed of the fleet being a logical exception. The slowest speed of a ship in a particular fleet determines the whole speed the fleet can travel at. Speed itself is also noteworthy. Now the speed of a fleet actually changes the travel time from one node to another, where previously it was fixed. In this information tab, you will see an overview of your fleet sorted into 3 unfoldable categories of ship. Capital ships, torpedo cruisers, and torpedo craft. I guess this is a good point to talk about ship types in general. So we do see some of these. See some torpedo stuff and subs, kind of the later phase of the game. We see cruisers, more utility ships, as far as I understand. And then the big ones that go pow pow boom boom. That is the technical term. Overall, we're increasing the variety of ship types to 20. This setup provides a better line of progression from early to late game and allowed us to model some historical depth along the way. Also, I'm assuming we won't just be able to like retrofit stuff, which made a lot of sense when they had this one building is one ship type of system, but now the ships are entities. I assume that completely turning a ship of the line into a super dreadnought is not a feasible thing. In the buildings tab of the panel, you will see all the Naval Administration buildings that contain at least 100 sailors of that fleet. You can also see how many ships are drawing from each of the buildings, how many levels the building currently has, and how many total sailors from them are associated with the fleet. Note that this number of ships in a fleet, it doesn't necessarily match up with the number of ships portrayed in the list, because a ship can theoretically draw crew from many different states and therefore be counted many times. Okay. Looks like we are counting the buildings in the fleet tab. Interesting. I wonder if you don't have enough men for your fleet and the fleet is out and about, I wonder if you have to go back to port to pick up men, or if they just auto-replenish. I assume it's the latter, but and that's all the modifiers in the Q tabs, which are pretty self-explanatory. The next big topic I will talk about is supply, so let's take a bit of a look at that, shall we? Honestly, like if you read Accountings of War, supply and logistics is like, okay, so in pop culture, supply and logistics is just dramatically unsexy, but like if you read Accountings of War and this type of stuff, it's just like one of the most centrally important things. But let's see how they've kind of decided to do this. I think in general in video games, supply is handled in a way that doesn't really feel like it properly captures the importance of the thing. In war games, battle gets focused on a lot more than supply, but okay. One major ambition we have when we started working on this expansion was to make supply feel more meaningful consideration. And so, while we focused, if Victoria was writing this would have been a whilst. While we focused on most of our attention here on Navy's course, we decided to tie all situations where armies were fighting on one side of the ocean into it as well. Here, let's move this a little. We wanted to try and limit the situations where you can simply send 300,000 men across the globe without having the infrastructure in place for it. So no more invading China's Greece in the early game. And that infrastructure, in our case the ports along the route, should be relevant, allowing you to project power, by having a bunch of ports. We also wanted to make the interruption of supply lines more haptic, less magical number, as the minus X convoys might have been expressed previously. Yeah. Feel tied down to stuff. So what have we tried and done there? First of all, to appease Poseidon, we have sacrificed our, only child to him. And we've also put convoys onto this. Oh, wait. we knew where that was going, I guess. We've put convoys onto the sacrificial altar. Convoys are dead, thank God. Long live supply ships. They symbolize the continuous transportation of goods to where a fleet or army would need them. Supply ships are not a market good, but rather need to be built like warships, and are strictly for military use. This is a very clear distinction we're introducing. All military operations that require supply, for example, sending a fleet or an army across the ocean, will make use of supply ships. All trade and civilian usage for port connections and the such will use merchant marine, which, kind of going back to talking about, how they kind of lay stuff down and then they build onto it. We got merchant marine last major patch, right, with the new trade system. And it will continue to be picking up the slack that convoys did do to keep market connections. It seems that the merchant marine will be keeping markets connected and this type of stuff. This means that the civilian ship goods, clippers, and steamers remain in place and are produced in shipyards. This is where the civilian side of formerly split shipyards comes into play, as the merged shipyards now produce warships, supply ships, and civilian market goods again. So, interesting. We see supply ship construction on the shipyards. Okay. So, we're constructing 3 different things out of these shipyards. Warboats, supply ships, and the other stuff. But this is effectively having more PMs. Ship construction, military, or supply. Okay, so there's just one military queue, and then from that military queue we could choose to produce either military or supply ships. I'm guessing that this is just going to be how much of the queue you have dedicated to being civilian versus non-civilian. But this does mean that countries that have, throughput bonuses for shipyards, whether they have good companies for them, or whether they have locations that are going to help, natural harbors, they will have an advantage in being able to produce more both civilian merchant marine as before, but also this stuff, I assume, unless they're getting rid of that and throughput and this type of thing. But okay. Higher budget allocation means a higher share of the supply ships being produced. Okay, never mind, just kidding. So if we were even Stevens here, it would be 20 and 20, I guess. What you can see now is that with the unredacted image of the shipyard is now the construction of how supply works. For this, essentially, you supply a share of the total production capacity that should go towards the military or supply usage. Supply ships also have separate ship construction queues so that you can produce both warships as well as supply ships at the same time. In this case, it means that 40 total are split, 10-30 across the 2 queues. The steps are 0, 25, etc., up to 100% of the total construction capacity going to supply ship construction. And how do supply ships work in practice as supply your fleet? Well, this is a complex question. All right, lay it on us with a complex answer. So bear with me for a moment. First, we need to talk about how supply actually works for a fleet of warships. Supply is stored on the ships, and each ship can have a different capacity for it. For example, a monitor will have a lower capacity, for example, 500, than, say, a light cruiser, 1800, but the supply in the fleet is distributed equally among all ships. So, for example, if a fleet is at 75% supply status, that means that all the ships are filled with 75% of their own capacity. This means that it can be beneficial to have ships with a larger capacity. These ones will be performing a, support function for the ships that go boom, boom, pow, as they contribute positively to the whole fleet, in the case that they need to go without fresh supplies for a while. But if these get sunk, right, you'll lose disproportionately more supply. If a ship carrying a lot of supplies is sunk in battle, the supplies and the added supply capacity for the fleet is gone. A fleet is a rate of supply consumption also depends on the ships in it. For example, a large fleet like Great Britain's, which ships across the ocean, will be harder to maintain than a small fleet protecting your own coast. Depending on the supply consumption of an army or fleet, you assign as many supply ships as they are needed to maintain supply. By default, and assuming you have enough supply ships available, each fleet, an army automatically gets assigned as many as they need to retain their supply level. Perfect. This is, I think, probably a good thing that it doesn't require explicit micro kind of per the way Victoria 3 works, or refill to 100% again over time. For example, the main fleet with the HMS Claudius consumes 2,000 supply a week. They are active, far away from home, sailing around Gibraltar. In order to keep their supply status of 100, they need 250 supply ships, which is what's being assigned to them by default. So, supply ships are convoys pretending that they're not convoys, kind of. They have the same symbol. That doesn't mean anything, though. And the symbol might get changed, of course. Because whip. Of course, this also means you'll have to make some unpleasant calls if you ever lack supply ships around the reserve. We've decided to add a 3-tier priority system, nice, that allows you to make sure a particular fleet or army always receives supply ships first or last. Nice and simple, not overly complicated, a way of distributing supply, although there might be issues. Often with these types of things, it takes a little bit of testing to find like use case issues, but something like this is relatively like hands-off, which you're trying to be with what you have going on. You don't want to create like an apocalyptic nightmare of micro, where like 50% of your attention is microing the fleets, right? So having something where you set the strategic intention and then the tactical elements get executed by your fleets is kind of preferred. Additionally, we also want to represent coaling station somehow, even though we don't have a range-based approach for ships. So what we are doing is reducing the supply ship consumption based on the nearest available port. So having a bunch of ports will allow you to operate further away, because it will consume fewer supply ships. This means you'll be able to build a more like actual navy, or dedicate stuff to more actual navy. If you're far from home, but you've managed to secure your own or a friendly port nearby, it will meaningfully reduce the demands on your supply network. So getting port access from Great Britain is going to be really valuable. This can be quite crucial to maintain a large overseas naval effort. But how would a country ever end up in a situation where they don't have enough supply ships available to cover all their needs? Well, among economic struggles or lack of shipyards, raiding supply lines is the answer for that. I'll have to explain how supply is traced from a country to their fleets or overseas armies. We introduce a new type of building, logistics centers, one for navies and one for armies. Logistics centers are automatically created and built in the HQ of the military formation. Interesting. They are placed where all the goods get consumed for the formation needs, rather than naval bases and barracks in the past. This makes sense. This allows us to draw a concrete path from one location to the formation. If we had distributed access across dozens of buildings, we could not have done this. That in turn allows... This sounds like something that probably is going to have some bugs on release. We'll see. That in turn allows countries... This sounds like the type of thing that would be buggy. Not that I'm saying that like the dynamic if you move your army from one HQ to the other, it's gonna have to delete the building and then rebuild it in another spot. And if you like zigzag them back or like cancel movements, this type of stuff, it seems like there's a lot of overlapping or potential places for that to go wrong. But like, this is the way it should be done, I think. Or this seems intuitive. That, in turn, allows countries to raid the supply lines. This works differently than with convoys, though. When a fleet raids supply lines, they actually engage the supply ships in the affected node in naval combat and need to sink them to cause actual damage. So, does this mean you'll have time to support them? Destroying these ships will mean, naturally, that there are fewer ships arrive in the formation in question, reducing their supply, at least temporarily. To continuously hunt an enemy supply, you also need to continuously raid their supply lines, causing them to continuously lose supply ships in the process. We'll go into much greater detail on how fleets engage in sea zones, what missions they have, and how combat behaves now, and so on in a much later dev diary, in a later dev diary, even though all these changes are, of course, coming with a free update. It's a bit too much to talk about all in this one place. Since our Steam screenshots have caused some speculation, here's also how the amount of available supply will be displayed. We use the old convoy capacity spot for it and show unassigned supply ships. In this breakdown, you can see all the currently used supply ships too. Other than the convoys, though, this is the actual number of ships you have in reserve and not as a capacity, as I explained. So we have 1K available. But we only have 77 assigned to fleets? Not sure I understand. Currently, not many supply ships are in use, but over time this will change until the fleets are full. Okay, got it. It looks like we do have... Okay, so the 79 is depleted, so this on the top panel is also going to be nice, where you can see just what your usage looks like as a proportion, or what your surplus looks like as a proportion of your usage, because this would be useful to know if you're using like 80% of your supply ships, or if you're using like 100% of your supply ships, you want to build them before it becomes an issue. Okay. Oh, but you're going to need to build them all. It's going to take a while. You're going to need to be proactive about this type of thing. One last thing about supply. While we don't cover anything of how supply travels further on land at the moment, armies that are overseas are bound to the same rules as fleets, so they will also have a logistics center and a route of supply ships depending on the army size going through them. I wonder if it creates an individual location or an individual state is getting the stimulus for the buy orders. Probably. I wonder how they pick which state it is. Probably just which state you go through on the supply when you first land. This should make it more difficult to try and send 300,000 men across the globe. One major pain point we wanted to tackle for a long time. Now, we move on to to one of the case uses for Navy, and it's a big one that we've wanted to do for a while. Our dear Tune will cover that part before I pick up the next. Tune. Have we heard from Tune before? I'm not sure we have. Of course, he will wish us a happy Thursday. Hello, Systems Designer Tune here to give you a rundown on tiered interests. That is not correctly spelled. It's HAPPY Thursday. Victoria 3's strategic interest system is probably one feature we that was left almost untouched since release, but this changes now. I think that there was some changes, but functionally no massive changes. I'm trying to remember. We are transforming the entire mechanic from a binary representation to a multi-level system that is not attained by the click of a button, but through dedication and investment into the region by various means, which is kind of how it should work. Keep in mind that everything here is from a work-in-progress build. Nails the landing on the qualifier here. So we see that we have tier 1 interests, tier 1 interest, tier 1 interest, tier 5 interest. So we're interested in our own continent, because I assume we're looking at playing this country here. But where our capital is, of course, we're very interested. At Peru, Bolivia, I have a hegemonic interest in the Andes strategic region, if I can keep it. To increase your interest level, you have to build up involvement in a given strategic region. You see that? That's bold. So you know that is a term. They are spoon-feeding you the understanding. Delicious. Okay, so this is a new mechanic. This can be done by a variety of means, by signing different treaties with local countries, having subjects, by sending your fleets to power protect off the coast, or, of course, outright conquest. Okay. We see engaged interest tier. Current tier for Great Britain, U. Not like this. Applies between 2,000 and 3,500 involvement. Extra infamy for cost targeting war goals in the strategic region. So I assume as you gain interest, you lose malice for the infamy cost. Allows starting diplomatic plays in the strategic region. Interesting, you cannot just deck randomly on South Africa all the time. You have to develop interest there. Allows taking sides in diplo plays in this region, allows signed defense pacts, etc., etc. And so with different tiers, we will be able to do different things. Notably, various treaties, I assume, will be the most base level thing. But okay. Will generate a claim when colonization of a state region reaches 50%. I also wonder if this percentage is lower with the higher strategic tiers. Nope, it's still 50%. Okay. As Great Britain, we don't have a real colonial real presence in Central Europe yet. Shout out to Victoria. But because it's in our direct neighborhood, we have a personal union with Hanover, we could still reach level 2. Attaining higher levels of interest will be important because it will allow you to access diplomatic actions and treaty articles with local countries that may not otherwise be available, as well as a wholly new and never-before-seen system of benefits, like, for example, the ability to generate colonial claims. That is being granted a claim on a state region, once your colony there grows to at least half the state region size, kind of improving some of the border war for colonization and the scramble for Africa. The East India Company's status as the hegemon of northern India grants it practically free reign. We see minus 25% infamy cost. I am wondering how this is going to stack. If this is going to stack additively, there's already a lot of sources of infamy discount. Alright, so I mean, you're going to generate the interest, so then you're going to bop the people and you're going to colonize them. So, someone get me a towel. The term local has come up at this point, so allow me to explain it as well. When we look at the presence of a country in a strategic reason, we definitely divide all the countries into one of two categories, local and non-local country. As a non-local country, you may gain involvement to the region by signing treaties with countries that are considered local there. Locality is determined by a number of factors. Having one's capital in a region makes sense. Having 25% locality in a region, is that owning 25% or more of the states? Having 25% of one's own incorporated states in that region. So as you sprawl out more, it is harder and harder for you to achieve a hegemon over your various areas because the lower percentage of your states will be in that region. But I assume the capital will always be 5. Or you will always be highly local. Yeah. Locality in a region itself is purely calculated based on a combination of own states, population, and GDP share. So it's not purely the number of states that count, but also what you have in them. This makes some sense. I wonder if we're gonna see metagames where, like, you you conquer something that has just a bunch of stuff in it to try and increase your locality there. I assume it being court or not is gonna make a big difference, though. By signing a treaty with Persia where the Shah grants us investment rights, not like this. Not like this. And in return, we send them some of our officers as military attaches. We will be generating enough involvement to push us to a level 1 interest. And so we will get a little bit of a push. The actual amount of involvement you can generate from engaging in diplomacy with local countries is scaled off of their locality. The very same treaty which would grant a lot less involvement if we assign it with tiny Kafiristan, for example. So you get the big actors, you get the big stuff. Lastly, the eagle-eyed amongst you may have noticed we bringing up a couple new strategic regions. That is because we revisited our strategic region setup, greatly reducing the density of strategic region map mode. Or sorry, greatly reducing the density of strategic regions on the map. Near East, that is a nice one for Ottomans. No, wait. Just kidding. Ottomans are still in 4 different strategic regions, just nightmare fuel, right? No, wait. Is it just 3 now? They're in the greater Persia because they control just a little bit up there. They're in the Balkans. I don't think they reached Eastern Europe. So the Ottomans, I believe, previously spanned 4 strategic regions, if I recall correctly, and now they span 3. We see, okay, Southern Europe and Northern Europe. Or Britain/Northern Europe. Or, well, this is Northern Europe. I don't know what the Isles would be called. Maybe interesting. But okay, some consolidation. East Africa, South Africa. Alright. Notably, South America has not been changed at all, as we used it as our template for the rest of the world. Alright, fair enough. Lino is coming back with some important topics now. Indeed, the next topic in the list is pretty quick to explain for the change, but fairly big implications, a lot of work to get it right. We wanted to improve upon the troop transportation as well, to make it more haptic, rather than armies simply turning into boats. And sometimes they turned into boats. That was always a fun bug, when your armies became boats. And also requiring certain capabilities for you to move your armies across the globe. So with 1.1.3, armies will be transported across bodies of water using your military ships. We played around with some ideas of using merchant marine or supply ships for the purpose, but it didn't really find a way to represent the requisitioning of civilian ships that would be feasible for us to implement. The way you do this is pretty simple. You give an army a command to move across the ocean, similar to a naval invasion, and then you'll be asked to choose a fleet to transport/escort them. So, this is increasing the amount of micro. Doesn't seem too bad though. The only way to transport troops is to give them a concrete target, so you cannot have them out to sea with your fleet permanently. While a fleet is transporting units, it cannot engage in other missions like intercepting or raiding, only moving to the target location. Ships have different capabilities for how good they are at transporting units, as you have seen. There's a ship specifically designed for this purpose with low combat capabilities outside of that, so ship and navy composition is going to be a thing. Almost as a side note here, I mentioned that you target a particular state with your army. There's actually a pretty big change. What we're doing, instead of HQs for stationing, etc., you will now target a particular state from which you can infer the HQ. This was not only necessary for troop transportation, but also increased the importance with strategic region merging, as we have done. With so many HQs, simply grow a bit too big for the logical distinction of where the army is currently localized. This means you'll be able to see armies stationed in capitals of different states in peacetime, rather than having them all stacked up in the same place if you desire to do so. I mean, assuming they also take time to move between the states, this is also going to make sense to actually distribute your armies around. But for the RP people, it can make sense. Also, you're less likely to get couped if you don't put the armies on your capital. Now we wouldn't be the Victoria 3 team if you weren't. That's true. But also, if we didn't add some new features in here in addition to the reworks, the main background here, we wanted to be able to enable a different way to have your fleet be able to pose a threat and of itself to the enemy. We wanted to enable a different way to have your fleet be able to pose a threat in and of itself to enemy coasts and ports. Any ideas? It's Marines. Marines are a new type of land unit, and unlike other land units, they can be permanently traveling with the fleet. Very cool. Marines have a separate capacity to be transported from regular units, which is going to be a lot smaller. Unlike the regular land units, Marines do not prevent a fleet from engaging in the missions, so you will be able to do a full spectrum of tasks while having some Marine detachment with them. I have a feeling we're going to really like Marines. Hoorah. What this allows you to do is even launch a naval invasion with the Marines directly from the fleet they have attached to, rather than launch it from your own territory. Marines have a better effectiveness in conducting naval invasions than regular units. This is a big deal too, because naval invasions are rough, as they won't suffer as big of a penalty. So, having a navy dedicated to being an expeditionary marine force is probably how you're supposed to kind of kick around some of the smaller colonial small guys, but won't necessarily be very useful against great powers themselves. Once the Marines have secured a beachhead in a major enemy theater, you'll probably reinforce them with your regular units quickly, as they'll rarely outnumber your enemies on land. But the maneuverability and being able to zip around and re-land and this type of thing is like, to the extent that there's actually a ton of micro in Victoria 3, it's born out of the repeated, adjusting of naval landings. And boy, oh boy, have they gotten the AI way better at actually preventing you from landing. For those of you who were around in the early days of Vic 3, you used to just need 1 boat, 2 boats, 3 boats. You didn't even need to have, if I recall correctly, you didn't even need to have, an army. And then you needed to have a dream. And if you just landed 3 boats, or you needed to have an army of one, size of 1, if you landed with 3 boats in one location, what would happen is their navy would intercept 1 boat, their army would intercept another boat, and the 3rd boat would get in for free. And then once it got in, you just full occupy the state. And then once you occupy the state, you could teleport your army there. And so what you would do is you would just land with 3 boats with 3 unit size of 1, and then just teleport your entire army there. And so, come a long way since then. On their own, however, they are far more capable of taking enemy islands or seizing a port from a technologically inferior opponent. Taking enemy islands also... they're not going to be able to defend the entire strategic region if they're actually in states. I wonder if the AI gets a lot worse at defending from landings here. Next up, I'm going to talk about some potentially interesting targets for you to use your Marines. Eyes shaking emoji. Yeah, basically. Straits and more. Oh. Jesus. The eyes shaking emoji indeed. This was on my personal wish list for a long time, and now we're actually doing it. It's the perfect expansion update for it, so it makes total sense that we would tackle Straits 2 now. Yep. With 1.1.3, we define a number of key straits across the globe. They are important, from Oresund to the Bosphorus to the Straits of Malacca. I feel like you're leaving out a strait that's quite relevant today, right now. With a single exception, they will all work like this. Control over the strait is shared between the 2 owners of the provinces that we define in the script. For example, Oresmund, it would be between Danish Zealand and Swedish Scania. Being the strait controller allows you to do a couple things. First of all, you can set access levels on who gets to pass through the strait. Here, you can see a couple of options. You could choose between only yourself, only your allies, everybody but your enemies, or everybody. You can also distinguish between military and civilian ships to let through. Important to note here is across all levels, is that all access levels behave like an AND gate. Meaning that if your buddy Denmark would gladly let you through, but the Swedes didn't like your comments about the candy and close the strait for you, shout out to people like Pastures, Danishes? Okay. And close the straits for you, you will not have access. One side can block the other. Okay, that is important to note. We see the Strait of Gibraltar with Britain having one part of it and Spain having another part of it. Redacted for one short moment, I promise. Your ad could be here. We could put an ad there. There's an ad joke in there somewhere. I couldn't think of it. Now, just owning the province is actually not enough to actually unlock controlling the strait. For that, you have to build at least one level of naval fortifications on your side of the strait. Naval fortifications, of course, are a new building constructed at the coast of your country. They take a lot of time to be built, and there's a low limit to how many you can build in each state. Apart from turning on strait control, their main function is to defend your coast. The main way they do that is by completely blocking naval invasions if the attacker's power is not above a threshold determined by the naval fortification. This makes sense. They go pew-pew against the boats. For example, a naval fortification may require you to attack with at least 6 battalions, a level 3, 1, 11, etc. As always, these values are subject to change. They should help to defend your coast in general, but also specifically against spamming tiny naval invasions. Yeah, which is relevant if you don't get to defend an entire HQ anymore. Having some of these to defend is going to be useful. No government expense. Huh. Other than this, they provide a defensive bonus in case the enemy will assemble long enough to force attempt to land. This bonus is created by the power difference between the initial attacker and defender. So if the attacker is twice as powerful as the defender, the defensive bonus applies with 50% of its maximum strength. Okay. Can we wear these down with our fleets? without that out of the way, I guess we won't have an answer to that question, or the answer is no. Another thing you could do with straits is collect tolls. Tolls are collected on the basis of the total volume of trade going through the straits, so they will have a different value based on the location. You've had similar access rights, the option controlling side to set your tolls for how much you'd like to charge. So in the case of the Øresund, Denmark may decide to charge 15% on everything, while Sweden decides to charge nothing, resulting in a total of 15% for everybody coming through. If Sweden also started charging 15%, it would add up to 30% for everyone. What that means, of course, is just like with access, if you control one side of both sides of the strait, you will have a lot more say about things going on in the strait. This makes sense. So, conquering straits will be useful. You'll also be able to turn off people's exports effectively if you can control the waterways. So, controlling the waterways, we mentioned earlier, controlling waterways should really give you a lot of control over various aspects of what's going on. And this is actually a really good example of... So one of the reasons Great Britain was so successful is Great Britain actually controlled markets in developing areas. Developing is a euphemism for colonized, I suppose. And they made it so that only they could sell their finished goods there. And towards the later portion of the 1800s, they were not actually even very good producers of the goods, because a lot of their stuff was outdated because they were first on the scene with industrialization. But what they had was the ability to force the goods down the throats of the colonized, because they could make it so that they could sell their goods while other people couldn't. And it was because of that, even though they were not as efficient, they were able to have profitable industries and project this because they had additional ability to control who got to trade and this type of stuff. If you toll the bejesus out of other countries trying to trade through the ports, you can lower their trade volume or lower the amount that their trade centers are getting, disincentivizing the creation of additional trade centers. And you could... It doesn't look like you could target particular goods, but this can allow you to try and get like a stranglehold over markets and this type of stuff, and has a synergistic effect with a lot of some of the other things that we've seen that came out with charters of commerce, where like being the majority seller of a good on a global scale gives you the ability to have better margins. And so even if you were to talk about the simulation, even if you weren't as good at producing the thing, you could maybe sell it in a way that's better for you because you shut down other people's sales in whichever way you prefer, by increasing the tariffs. And then the increased tariff cost is going to make it so that they move less volume, allowing you to have a higher proportion of the world volume and acquire more from your trading. Right? Okay. Nothing better than charging absurd amount of money for ships to pass. Our favorite. Is it our favorite? I should also mention that we also implemented one special case, Gibraltar, which requires you to own both sides of the strait before you can lock it down. This was too impactful when you lock down all the Mediterranean from the get-go. So I'm guessing as Great Britain, the first thing you do is go knocking on Spain's door. Canals will also be straits, by the way, following the same rules. We're investigating options to make their companies take the collected tolls into account. This would be sweet, but this is challenging and may not make it for now. Womp womp, we've been teased. As you may see, we're trying to ship a giant unit of an update to you. All right. Future Dev Diaries. This is our first ever for cycle, and we think you can see how much meat there is in this one. As mentioned, there are some major free changes coming which Tune will go over in some time, for some time, with a happy Thursday, and we have a couple other smaller additions, changes, and developments which you'll encounter closer to release. Here's the full schedule of Dev Diaries. So, we have... Is this a happy Monday? Happy Thursday. Happy Thursday. Happy Thursday, happy Thursday. Happy Thursday. Happy... Tuesday? All right. So long, everyone. And we do get our Happy Thursday sandwich. Double happy salutation. Everyone knows happy salutations belong in sandwich format. Not capitalized, though. It is indeed a holiday. But it is a sandwich. Speaking of, I actually have some really nice lunch meat. I'm going to have a sandwich after this. Shout out to sandwiches. Just like everyone felt sandwiched in between Great Britain and Great Britain. Okay. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, please feel free to like, comment, subscribe. Very excited about some of the stuff, especially like, okay, I just like economics more. This stuff allow you to kind of try and control economies via Straits and this type of stuff. This to me is going to be very fun to unpack this type of thing. But I hope you enjoyed. If you did, like, comment, subscribe. YouTube algorithm thing. You can pre-order the entire expansion pack. If you pre-order, it is 20% off. If you buy it as the bundle with this next one, it comes out April 28th. The big pack and the 2 little flavor packs coming out, one later this year and the other at the start of next year, per kind of their release schedule. If you are interested in supporting the channel, a really good way to do that, if you are interested in buying this, is to go onto the official Paradox web store and buy from there, and use the code Generalist in all caps at checkout. That is Generalist in all caps, one word Generalist, not in lowercase caps, the several words Generalist in all caps. So that one will not work. But this will send 12% of the sale my way. It won't give you any sort of discount. It'll be slightly inconvenient for you because you will be emailed a code rather than just having it automatically unlocked on Steam, but it is a way to support the channel. Also, I think it's good for Paradox too, because I think otherwise they pay 30% to Steam. I'm not 100% sure on this. I should probably just double check with the people. And so, anyways, other than all that, as we explained, and then also have a good one. Sail you later.